Basically, looking at your execution process, you have to check the phase, what is the outcome, and look at it side by side, so vis-a-vis what was your initial goal for that particular phase. So the first goal obviously is to get some water, find a woman. The best way to find young women that are unmarried, or women generally, is at that time, for a man who is an outsider, is at the well. At that time, they don't have what we have now in modern days, where people are going to walk, so you can meet somebody, at the traffic, on the road, or in traffic, or at social events. At that time, it was just maybe fetching of water or family banquets, right? So the goal, you see that Eliezer's, the outcome matches his goal. He has gone to a place where he would come across women or damsels, and then he has come across one. So this is basically how you can now check if your expectation has actually been met, because it is through the evaluation after taking action, which is execution, and that phase is over or is done, that you can now evaluate, and then you can now begin to ask certain follow-up questions. So we're going to go through the follow-up questions and what it means depending on which answer you get. So you have to find answers. Your evaluation must give you answers to some of these questions. Number one, what is the phase goal? That is this execution phase. What is the goal? The second question is, does the achieved outcome align with the goal set for the phase? And I will say in the case of Eliezer, it does. The outcome matches the goal he set for that phase. Imagine if he was at the well and no woman showed up. No woman showed up. Maybe for some reason they closed the city gates or something, or there's a curfew, people are supposed to stay home. In that case, he has not met the goal. The outcome did not match the goal for that particular phase. However, in Eliezer's case, it did match. So the third question you would then ask yourself when you're looking at your execution accuracy, you're going to ask yourself, if yes, that is, if the achieved outcome matches your goal, does it tally with the overall goal? Now, the fourth question is, if it's no, what error occurred and how can it be rectified to remain aligned with the overall goal? For example, what if the woman Eliezer met at the well actually came, she fetched water, she fed the camels, but she's not even from that city, she's from another city, they're having drought, and she came to fetch water all the way. That outcome doesn't tally with the overall goal, even though it matches that particular phase of finding a young woman that he can bring back for Isaac as a wife. Because that is a young woman, she ticks that box. She is virtuous and dutiful, she ticks that box. But she's not from Abraham's lineage or family. Do you see where I'm going with that phase outcome? So sometimes in life, these are the points with which, when we're carrying out projects or doing our personal business or in relationships, things can begin to get diverted, and if we're not sensitive, if we don't evaluate and do testing, slowly and surely things get derailed. Excuse me. So if your answer is a yes answer to the question 3, then it is an approval for you to move to the execution phase, the next one, and continue your execution process. However, if your answer is a no, then it leads you to do troubleshooting. What is troubleshooting? Is you bringing up all of the data you have to identify what went wrong and how to correct the mistake. And usually this will delay project execution. However, I assure you, delaying your execution process is better than distorting, thwarting, losing the plot, completely going off your initial goal or vision without even realizing. So it's worth the wait to troubleshoot and to identify what is wrong, then correct the mistake. In fact, as a matter of fact, delay prevention is one of the reasons seasoned professionals are engaged to execute projects or tasks. It's not economical to engage services of novices, people that do not have expertise. So doing so can be costly in the terms of your resources, your project delivery time, and many other factors. Because you have to remember that most projects have a specific delivery time. And when these are missed, it usually not only results in losses or legal suits, but there are also financial consequences. Now, let's go back and look at Eliezer and Rebecca, right? At the emergence of Rebecca, basically, she comes just after Eliezer finishes the prayer phase. If you recall, when we talked about execution in our previous Sunday schools, we discussed about how a key part of your execution process at the start is praying to God. And we see that phase of prayer, Eliezer just finishes it, and Rebecca quite literally manifests, she emerges. So that leads Eliezer to do a couple of things. Moving on to another phase, still talking about evaluation. The first thing he does is he does a physical assessment. Now, when you talk about a physical assessment, it is the critical examination of the outcome of a phase. In your relationships, for example, it kind of looking at this out for striking qualities that create chemistry between two people. When you look at the business, on the other hand, when you're building projects, it can look like checking out the outcome of your construction work vis-a-vis the original building plan, your architectural drawings, or even your structural design. You're looking at it like, okay, I'm looking at this 2-bedroom they built, I'm holding all these plans and drawing in my hand, and it looks nothing like the drawing. So what drawing did they use to build what I'm looking at? If you look at cosmetics production, as I've talked about in past Sunday schools, is that we're checking whether the color and the texture of the product aligns with the goal and aligns with what was set out to be achieved. This is a test. Physical assessment is usually a test of physical appeal and alignment, right? On the flip side, you also have spiritual assessment, because hey, something might look right doesn't mean it is the right fit. So this is looking beyond the surface of what is physical or tangible by testing core values. That is what you talk about when you're looking at spiritual assessment, which is why Eliezer goes beyond just asking for water to personally drink to, there's the issue of the camels drinking water. In relationships, this is not just about chemistry, but commitment to God and the institution of marriage. For a building project, it becomes a test of structural soundness rather than how it appeals to you when you're looking at it architecturally, right? Now, back to our example, when it comes to cosmetics production, your focus is going to shift from packaging and the texture of the product to how does it react on the skin, how effective is it for your goal, and the effectiveness in your body, to ascertain if the product formulation was strictly adhered to. And the classic example of this is some of connector stuffs have had their formulas improved, and some clients have actually reached out to talk about their observations. So this is them, they did their own spiritual assessment in this point of view, wherein they could tell, okay, there's something different about this product. And they also did a physical assessment that, okay, something is different, even though spiritually the product is just slightly improved. Physically, I can notice some changes. And that's how it is when you're carrying out projects and you're carrying out execution phases while you're carrying out your project. Each phase you go through, you have to assess and keep in line, like I said, so you don't go off tangent or end up creating something that quickly diverts from your original vision or goal. So with spiritual assessments, you're being called to go into the deep, to step into the deep. Go deeper than the surface and look at your foundation. How are you establishing your foundation? Consequently, Eliezer had to determine whether the lady who manifested was God's chosen bride for Isaac. When the manifestation of desire comes, testing. After something has manifested, you should test. Right? So let's go to part 3. Topic for part 3 is application of the physical and spiritual assessment by Eliezer. So let's go a bit deeper into today's reading. Application of the physical and spiritual assessment by Eliezer. So Eliezer, first of all, he acknowledges her physical uniqueness. That's number 1, physical assessment. And how do we know this? If you look at Genesis 24 verse 16, and the damsel was fair to look upon. So we can infer that it is Eliezer describing from the first meeting. Now, what does this mean? Rebecca was number 1. She was beautiful. That was visible. So it's a type of quality that attracts people to a person or thing. That is beauty, by the way.